He was sitting at the kitchen table with a single sheet of paper in front of him. The form was from HR, 2 columns, 2 options, 1 decision. On the left, a single life annuity. The number was bigger, a lot bigger. On the right, joint and survivor. The number was smaller, every month, for the rest of their lives. He picked up the pen. His hand moved toward the left column almost automatically. More money. That felt like the right answer. Then he heard the sound of dishes in the kitchen. His wife was in there, just doing what she always does on a Sunday afternoon. Unbothered, trusting, he put the pen down. Here is the thing nobody tells you before you sit in that chair. A pension feels like the finish line. You worked 30 years for it. You earned it. And when HR finally hands you that paper, there is this deep exhale, like the financial anxiety you have been carrying since your 30s is finally lifting. But that form is not a reward, it is a test. And the decision you make on it is irrevocable. Not hard to change. Not you might regret it. Irrevocable. Whatever you mark on that sheet locks the financial fate of your household for the next 20, 25, maybe 30 years. I have sat across from people who checked the wrong box. Not because they were careless. Because they thought they understood the game. What makes a pension dangerous is not the paperwork. It is the illusion of certainty it creates. When that guaranteed number lands in your account every month, it feels like nothing can go wrong. That feeling is real. But it can also blind you to the 2 quiet forces that will erode everything you think you have secured. If you are about to make the biggest financial decision of your retirement, or you know someone who is subscribed to Wes Investor, this is where we talk straight about retirement money. No filters. Let's get into why having a pension changes everything. Most people spend their entire working life trying to build a number big enough to retire on. The standard advice goes something like this: save as much as you can, invest it, and when you retire, draw it down carefully so you do not run out before you die. The whole strategy revolves around that portfolio surviving long enough. But if you have a pension, you are playing a fundamentally different game. And most people with pensions do not realize it yet. A pension creates what financial planners call an income floor, a base level of guaranteed income that arrives every single month, regardless of what the stock market does, regardless of whether you feel like managing anything that day. Think about what that actually means in dollar terms. If your pension pays $3,000 a month, that is $36,000 a year, guaranteed for life. Apply the rule of 25, and that income stream is the functional equivalent of having $900,000 sitting in a perfectly safe, perfectly reliable account. Not invested, not at risk. Just there. That is not a small thing. That is a foundation most retirees would give anything to have. And yet, the majority of people with pensions do not invest like they have it. I have watched this happen more times than I can count. Someone comes in, has a solid pension, maybe a small Social Security benefit on top of it, and then I look at their 401k, bonds, conservative funds, a portfolio built for someone terrified of losing everything, which would make sense if the pension did not exist, but it does exist. And that changes the math completely. When you have no pension, your investment portfolio has to do 2 jobs simultaneously. It has to generate income, and it has to protect against the risk of outliving your money. Those 2 goals are often in tension. That tension is why people get conservative. They are not wrong to be careful. But when you have a pension covering your essential expenses, your portfolio only needs to do 1 job: grow. The survival function is already handled. The floor is already there. So why do so many pension holders still load up on bonds and low-yield funds? Because the instinct for safety does not update automatically. You spent decades in accumulation mode, protecting what you built. That habit does not just disappear when HR hands you the retirement form. You carry the psychology of someone who cannot afford to lose, even after the pension has made you structurally safer than most. The result is what I call the double conservative trap. Your pension is already the conservative anchor in your retirement plan. When you then make your 401k conservative on top of it, you have doubled down on safety in a way that actually creates a different kind of risk. The slow, quiet erosion of purchasing power. Bonds returning 3 or 4% do not keep up with a 3% inflation environment over 20 years. They barely tread water. Meanwhile, your pension, with no cost of living adjustment, is losing ground in real terms every single year. You are not protected. You are just watching it happen slowly. Now, before we go further, here is something worth knowing if you are worried about your pension company going under. The Pension Benefit Guaranty Corporation, the PBGC, is a federal backstop. For most retirees around age 65, it currently insures pension income up to more than $92,000 a year. That is a meaningful layer of protection. But the PBGC protects you from one specific threat: company insolvency. It cannot protect you from inflation. It cannot protect your spouse if you choose the wrong payout option. And it does nothing about the structural problem inside your own portfolio. That armor has real limits, and the enemy it cannot stop is already inside the wire. Let's go back to the man at the kitchen table. He chose the single life option. His reasoning was not reckless. He did the math in his head. The difference between the two options was about $400 a month. That is $4,800 a year. He thought about the trips they had been putting off, the kitchen renovation, the small pleasures of finally having room to breathe. He figured he was in good health. He figured he would live a long time. He figured the extra money was worth it. So he signed the form. And for the first few years, it felt like the right call. Then came the diagnosis. Nothing catastrophic at first, just the kind of medical news that quietly rearranges your priorities. The trip started to feel less important. And for the first time since retirement, he found himself lying awake at night doing a different kind of math. If I go first, what does she have left? That is the question the HR packet never asks you to sit with. And it is the one that matters most. Before we get to the survivor question, though, there is a slower threat that most pension holders never fully reckon with. One that does not arrive with a diagnosis. It just arrives month after month. So gradually you barely notice until the damage is already done. Most private pensions in America have no cost of living adjustment. No KOH law. The number on your statement in year 1 is the same number you will receive in year 20. It does not go up. But everything you buy does. If your pension pays $2,000 a month today, and inflation runs at its long-term historical average of around 3% per year, the purchasing power of that $2,000 will be cut roughly in half over 20 years. You will still receive $2,000, but in real terms, you will only be able to buy what about $1,100 buys you today. Your safe income quietly becomes a shrinking income. No announcement, no warning letter. Just the slow arithmetic of time. This is why the pension cannot be your entire plan. It is the floor, not the ceiling. And if you treat it like a ceiling, inflation will spend 2 decades lowering it. Now layer on the second flaw. I have sat across from couples in that moment. The form is on the table. One person is trying to project calm. The other is quiet in a way that is hard to describe. I have seen the breath held, the eye contact avoided, the pen moved toward a box that cannot be taken back. It is not a financial transaction at that point. It is a statement about whose security comes first. The single life payout gives you the maximum monthly income. But when the pension holder dies, the income stops. Completely. The surviving spouse receives nothing from that source from that day forward. The joint and survivor option pays less each month. Typically 10 to 20% less, but it continues paying the surviving spouse for the rest of their life. That gap, $300, $400, $500 a month, feels significant when you are staring at it on a form. It feels less significant when you understand what the alternative actually costs. Consider what happens if he passes away at 72, which is not a dramatic scenario that is close to the average life expectancy for American men. His wife loses the pension income entirely if he chose single life. At the same time, the household loses one Social Security check. The a survivor benefit rule means only the higher of the two benefits survives. The lower one disappears. That is an immediate income drop of 30 to 50% for the household. But here is the part that makes it genuinely difficult. Her expenses do not drop by 30 to 50%. The mortgage or rent does not care. The property taxes do not adjust. The utilities, the insurance, the car payment, the medications. Research consistently shows that a surviving spouse's essential costs typically fall by only about 20 to 25%. The income collapses. The bills do not. I call this the widow's penalty, and it is not a risk. For people who chose single life without a backup plan, it is a near mathematical certainty. Now look at it through what I think of as the pension mirror. A pension is not a gift that arrives free of obligation. It is a fixed liability, a number that will not grow, attached to a life that will. The mirror forces you to see it honestly. If this income stops when I die, what does that actually mean for the person sleeping next to me? Choosing single life to capture an extra $400 a month is not inherently wrong, but it becomes wrong the moment you do it without accounting for what it transfers onto your spouse's future. There is a path that lets you take the higher payout and still protect your household. It involves using part of that premium to fund a term life insurance policy, essentially creating your own survivor benefit outside the pension system. Some people call this pension maximization. It does not work for everyone, but for those in good health at retirement, it is worth running the numbers. The point is not that joint life is always the right answer. The point is that whichever box you check, you need to know exactly what you are trading and exactly who absorbs the cost if things do not go as planned. Before you look at your pension summary, check one thing. Does your plan include a KOH law provision? Leave a comment below with either has KOH law or no KOH law. It matters more than most people realize, and it will help us all see the real picture of what pension holders are actually working with out there. Most retirement plans are built around a best-case scenario. Both spouses live a long and healthy life. Income stays stable. Expenses stay manageable. The market cooperates. Nothing goes catastrophically wrong. That is a reasonable thing to hope for. It is not a reasonable thing to plan around. A real plan has to survive the hard scenario. Not just describe it, actually survive it. So let's run the numbers on what happens to a household when the pension holder dies first and see whether the financial structure holds or collapses. We will use the same man from earlier. He is 72 when he passes. He and his wife had been living on a combined income that looked like this. His pension at $2,000 a month, his Social Security at $2,200 a month, her Social Security at $1,400 a month. Total household income, $5,600 a month. That feels stable. For two people, $5,600 a month is workable in most parts of the country. Now he is gone. The pension, because he chose single life, stops immediately. That is $2,000 a month gone. Social Security applies the survivor benefit rule. The household keeps only the higher of the two checks. His $2,200 stays. Her $1,400 disappears. Total household income after his death, $2,200 a month. They went from $5,600 to $2,200. That is a 61% income drop overnight. Now look at what her expenses actually are. The mortgage has 8 years left. Property taxes, homeowner's insurance, one car, utilities, groceries for one, her medications, maybe a part-time caregiver down the line. When you add it up honestly, Her monthly costs might drop from roughly $4,200 to around $3,200, a 24% reduction, because most of the fixed costs do not care that there is now one person in the house instead of two. She needs $3,200 a month to live. She has $2,200 coming in. That is a $1,000 monthly shortfall every single month for what could be another 15 or 20 years. Without savings to draw from, without a life insurance payout, without any backup structure, that gap has one answer: sell the house. This is the fragility path. It is not a worst-case nightmare scenario. It is the predictable, arithmetic outcome of a single life election made without a contingency plan. Now run the same scenario with one structural change. Same household, same income, same life. But at retirement, he made a different choice. He accepted the joint and survivor option. His monthly pension dropped from $2,000 to $1,700. They absorbed a $300 per month reduction while he was alive. He still passes at 72. The Social Security dynamic is the same. Her check disappears, his stays. But the pension continues, $1,700 a month, now paid directly to her for the rest of her life. Her income after his death, $2,200 Social Security plus $1,700 pension. That is $3,900 a month. She needs $3,200. She has $3,900. There is a $700 monthly buffer. The house stays. The bills get paid. She does not have to make a desperate decision in the worst year of her life. That is the resilience path. The difference between the two outcomes is $300 a month while he was alive. Roughly the cost of a car payment he probably did not think twice about. There is a third path worth knowing for people in good health at the point of retirement. Some choose to take the maximum single life payout and use a portion of the monthly premium to purchase a 15-year term life insurance policy. If the pension holder dies within the term, the death benefit replaces what the surviving spouse would have received under joint life. If both spouses outlive the term, they keep the higher monthly income. This approach, sometimes called pension maximization, is not a one-size solution. It depends heavily on the cost of the insurance, the health of the pension holder at retirement, and how long the survivor is likely to need the income. But for the right household, it is a legitimate third option worth modeling before signing anything. The core question in all three paths is the same. If you are not here tomorrow, does your spouse have enough to stay in their life? Not downsize into a smaller apartment at 74. Not move in with the kids. Stay in the life you built together. When you have that answer clearly and with actual numbers, you will know which box to check. Here is something I used to get wrong. For years, I defaulted to the standard playbook. Client is in their late 50s, approaching retirement, has a pension coming. Standard advice: start shifting the portfolio toward bonds, reduce equity exposure, lock in stability. That is what the textbook said. That is what most advisors said. That is what I said. Then I started paying closer attention to what the pension was actually doing inside the household financial picture. The pension was already the bond. It was already doing the job of a conservative, fixed income anchor. Telling someone with a guaranteed income floor to also hold 50 or 60% bonds in their 401k is like putting two seatbelts on one seat and leaving the other seat completely unprotected. You have doubled up in one place and left a real risk unaddressed somewhere else. That real risk, the one getting ignored, is inflation. And the only asset class with a strong historical track record of outpacing inflation over long periods is equities. Stocks. Ownership in companies that raise prices, grow revenue, and compound over time. If your pension covers your essential monthly expenses, your 401k or IRA does not need to generate income right now. It does not need to protect you from market volatility right now. Because a bad market year does not threaten your ability to pay the electric bill. The pension does that. What your portfolio needs to do is grow aggressively enough to stay ahead of the inflation that is slowly eroding your pension's purchasing power. That is the job, and bonds, at current yields, are not equipped to do it. This is the optionality the pension creates, and most people never use it. Now add one more variable that changes the math significantly. Under the Secure Act 2.0, now in full effect, the required minimum distribution age for most Gen X investors has been pushed to age 75. That means if you retire at 62 or 65 with a pension covering your living costs, you potentially have 10 to 13 years during which you are not required to touch your IRA at all. Think about what that window means in practice. Say you have $400,000 in your IRA at retirement. You do not need to draw it down because the pension is handling your monthly expenses. If that $400,000 grows at a hypothetical 7% average annual return for 12 years without a single withdrawal, it becomes roughly $900,000 by the time RMDs kick in. You did nothing. You just did not interrupt it. The pension made that possible. It removed the pressure to sell during down markets, removed the temptation to draw early for expenses, and gave your investments the one thing they needed most: time. That is the real value of the income floor. Not just security, optionality, the ability to make portfolio decisions based on strategy instead of necessity. When markets are up, you pull from the IRA to fund the kitchen renovation or the trip you have been planning. When markets drop 20%, you leave it completely alone because the pension covers the bills regardless. You are never forced to sell low. That asymmetry, over a decade of compounding, is worth far more than the marginal safety of holding extra bonds. The pension does not just protect you from running out of money. It changes the entire posture of how you invest. Most people with pensions invest like they are afraid. They should be investing like they have a foundation. Imagine it is Sunday night. You have a meeting with HR Monday morning to finalize your retirement paperwork. You have the benefit summary on the kitchen table. Maybe you have read through it once, maybe twice, but you are not sure you have actually stress tested it. You have 48 hours. Here is exactly what to do with them. Step 1. Scan for KOH law. Pull out your pension summary document and find the section on benefit adjustments. Read it carefully. Does your pension include a cost of living adjustment provision? If yes, you are in a stronger position than most. Your income has at least some protection against inflation built in. If no, you need to mentally reprice every number on that form right now. Whatever monthly amount you see on that page, apply a 30% reduction in your head. Not because that is what you will receive in year one, but because that is roughly what 20 years of 3% annual inflation will do to your real purchasing power by the time you are in your 80s. The number that looks like security today is a smaller number than it appears. No KOH law means the inflation fight falls entirely on your 401k and IRA plan accordingly. Step 2. Run the survivor's math. This is the calculation HR will not do for you. Take a piece of paper. Write down your monthly pension amount under the joint and survivor option. Then write down both Social Security estimates, yours and your spouse's. Now cross out your pension entirely. Cross out the lower Social Security check. What remains is what your spouse has to live on if you die first. Take that number and compare it to 75% of your current household monthly expenses, not 50%. Research consistently shows surviving spouses retain roughly 75 to 80% of their prior household costs, because the fixed bills do not scale down with the head count. If what remains after crossing out those two income sources does not cover 75% of current expenses, you cannot choose single life without a backup plan. Full stop. The math does not work, and no amount of optimism about living a long life changes the arithmetic for the person who might be left behind. If the numbers are close but not quite there, That is when pension maximization is worth modeling. Get a term life insurance quote before the HR meeting, not after. Step 3. Rebalance your 401k with the pension in mind. Log into your retirement account this week. Look at your current allocation. If your pension is already covering your essential monthly expenses in retirement, you do not need your 401k to be conservative. The pension is your conservative allocation. What your portfolio now needs is growth, specifically enough growth to offset the purchasing power your pension is quietly losing each year to inflation. For most pension holders in their early to mid-60s with a decade or more before RMDs, an equity allocation of 70 to 80% in the 401k is not aggressive. It is calibrated. It reflects the actual risk profile of the total household, not just the investment account in isolation. If that number feels uncomfortable, ask yourself one question. Uncomfortable compared to what? Compared to watching $2,000 a month slowly become the equivalent of $1,100 a month over the next 2 decades. That is the real risk you are managing. These 3 steps will not take you longer than a couple of hours, but they will tell you more about the actual shape of your retirement than anything HR is going to hand you across that table. Walk in Monday knowing exactly what you have, exactly what you are choosing, and exactly why. That is the difference between signing a form and making a decision. A pension is a rare thing. Most people your age are building retirement out of market returns and savings rates and a lot of hope that the numbers work out. You have something they do not. A guaranteed floor. A check that arrives regardless of what the market does in October, regardless of what happens in Washington, regardless of how the year turns out. That is genuinely worth something. Do not underestimate it. But it only becomes the foundation it is meant to be when you treat it with clear eyes. When you see the inflation problem for what it is and build around it. When you sit with the survivor question long enough to get an honest answer, not the answer that feels comfortable in the moment. The man at the kitchen table at the beginning of this video. The one whose hand stopped before checking that box. He did not have more information than you do right now. He just had a moment of stillness long enough to ask the right question. What does this decision mean for the person I am responsible to? That question changes the math. And once you have answered it honestly, the form in front of you stops being intimidating. It becomes a tool, one you know exactly how to use. You will walk into that HR office knowing what your pension actually covers, what it does not, and what you have put in place to handle the rest. That is not a small thing. That is the difference between hoping retirement works out and knowing that it will. If this video helped you see your pension paperwork differently, subscribe to Wes Investor. This is where we work through the parts of retirement planning that the benefit packet leaves out. We will be back with more. See you then.